I extend a very warm welcome to all the viewers watching Soul to Soul Talk Show. This show aims at taking you on a spiritual journey, a journey which everyone, you and me, somewhere deep down in the heart wishes to take, a journey which truly is everyone's ultimate goal. But this journey will not be based on just preaching about spirituality in general. It will be based on the valuable experiences shared by eminent personalities from different professions and different countries who will be joining us here on the show and talking to us. And today it's our pleasure and our honor that we have a much sought after speaker, eminent author, former medical and science correspondent, and a journalist, Brother Navel Hatchkinson. Welcome to the studio, brother.
Thank you, Saranya.
A pleasure to have you.
It's great to be here.
Brother Navel is also associated with the Brahmakumaris family since over 31 years, and he has conducted discussions on various topics such as science and spirituality, health and consciousness, and many more topics worldwide. And to start the show, brother, could you tell us about your professional life?
Yes, actually I worked full-time in newspapers for more than 30 years.
Okay.
And I would say that my career fell into two halves.
Okay.
I entered newspapers after taking an economics degree in the UK. But during that degree, while I was a student, I didn't find that I enjoyed the studies all that much, but I did a lot of work on university publications.
Okay.
So that was something new in my family, to work in the media. And I got a job on a regional newspaper and then moved to London, where after a spell as a sub-editor, which is like a clerk, really, editing and headlines and checking.
Okay.
Then I worked as social policy correspondent of the Times back in the 1970s, and then got a job as a full-time medical correspondent with the London Daily Mail. And that was the first time that I really started as a specialist reporter. Previously I'd done a variety of things, although I always enjoyed the more academic subjects rather than foot-in-the-door journalism, if you know what I mean, you know, the more sensational things.
Okay.
But I enjoyed the field of health and medicine very much, and it taught me a lot. But about halfway through my career, I started feeling that the health subjects that I was writing about were relevant to me as well as to my readers, that if I carried on living as I was at that time, very stressful actually, working very hard, chasing the deadlines, but more than that, a kind of ego element in it, which is addictive, and it means that you find it very hard to stop. You find it hard to set limits in your work when it's the ego, because it's a kind of addiction. You know, you want a bigger show in the paper, you want your byline, you want to reach a lot of people, you want to have a lot of influence. And it's a kind of addiction, so that when you get a big show in the paper, you feel very buoyed up, like you've had a shot of the drug that you need. But if you have a bad day and your story isn't used by the editor, then you don't feel good, you know, you feel it's down. And so you have to work even harder to try to get yourself in the paper again. And quite a lot of my colleagues are like this to some degree, but I think I was quite a bad case, because by my mid-30s, I really was starting to feel quite exhausted by this treadmill of always working harder and harder and harder. And the newspaper valued my work. I got a lot of good shows, and I took the job quite seriously from the start. I wanted to help readers with good information, but that ego-driven element was meaning that my life wasn't balanced. And right from the beginning, actually, when I first got a job full-time as a medical correspondent, I found myself very interested in the whole influence of the mind on the body, and how the way we live our life makes us vulnerable to ill health or promotes well-being, depending on the kind of thoughts and feelings that we have habitually. I was very interested in this, and so I made my main contacts in the field were doctors who nowadays it's called holistic approaches to medicine. They didn't just want to fix the symptom. They wanted to try to help the patient to deal with the aspects of their life that had generated the symptom in the first place. You know, the kind like working too hard or difficulty in relationships. These things have a big influence on our happiness and our health. And I wrote about that a lot. I became very interested in the subtle mechanisms that link the brain with the body. And a lot of research was emerging in the 1970s that supported the whole idea that our thoughts and our feelings are the primary determinants of good health. So then I started to realize that because of this ego-driven element, it was actually creating a crisis in my own health.
Right.
By my mid-30s, working harder and harder, I'd started to reach the limits of what my body would allow me to do, and I was in danger of becoming one of the heart attack victims that I would be writing about. So this was actually probably what opened my mind to realizing that I needed to think about myself in a different way from how I had done up till that time.
So till then you were not aware of this ego that was building in you?
No, I didn't understand that this was, I didn't understand the distinction which I would now make between the ego self and the true self, which is what in spiritual terms we would say as the soul.
Soul.
And so, but I was feeling the lack of soul awareness. And this was looking back, this was what was causing me to become quite drained and unhappy. And the halfway through my career, thanks to these contacts with the doctors who were stressing the importance of the mind in making us ill or in promoting well-being, thanks to that, I left my full-time job for 2 years to write a book. And it was published in 1984. It was called Will to be Well, The Real Alternative Medicine. And it was quite successful, went through a few editions because it described all these subtle links that science was beginning to demonstrate, at least between the brain and the body.
The brain and the body? Okay.
Yes, not really the soul, but while I was writing that book, I came across the Brahma Kumaris and it turned out that they were very good guides in this area for me. Their method of reflection and the sort of spiritual nourishment that I learned through the Brahma Kumaris became very important in my life. And to begin with, I didn't really understand because I had a very materialistic outlook. Science for me was my best hope for the future because I felt that science avoided all the nonsense that I thought.
Blind faiths.
Yes, exactly. So much damage had been done by religion. You could see it especially in Europe. All the wars that had been fought and the persecution that had happened in the name of God. You know, it didn't make any sense to me. So I thought science was our best hope for the future. But then through my work, I realized that science, when it is just purely materialistic, leaves out some really important factors, including things like what really gives us happiness in life, what really gives us a sense of purpose. Science can't answer these questions very easily. So the Brahma Kumaris, when I first came across them and their peaceful meditations, even though I didn't understand their teachings about the soul and the supreme soul, because that didn't have much meaning for me actually. I was so kind of physically oriented in my thinking. But I felt that the presence of the Brahma Kumaris created a vibration or a feeling or some memory inside that was truth. That I recognized. And so I started to gain benefit from being in the gatherings of BK practitioners. And that started to strengthen me so that in that 2 years, actually that book introduced some of the ideas about a sense of purpose, about happiness, about finding your purpose in life, partly thanks to my exposure to the BKs.
So that influenced the content
it
of the book?
influenced that book, yes.
Okay.
I wasn't fully understanding yet, but definitely it was pointing in that direction. And then I went back into full-time newspaper work, and it was almost like a little personal trial that previously I'd been so exhausted by my work. Now I was back in, after 2 years, learning to manage myself with reflective practices. My second half of my career, the next 15 years, was so much better. Amazing contrast, because I wasn't handling myself so badly. You know, because of these reflective practices, I was able to nourish, I would now say nourish the soul. The soul itself was re-establishing itself in my awareness. Previously, everything was for the brain and the ego and that kind of living, which always will run you into difficulties, actually, I now see. I started to feel as if that hunger that was inside me previously, which took the form of this desperate ego, that was starting to calm down. And instead I was starting to be able to be with people more as a more kindly human being. Very simple. But I didn't recognize that before. And so when I went back into the job, I found that I had more time for colleagues, I was better able to listen, I was better able to stand up for my point of view if I felt that I was right and the news editor was wrong in asking me to do something. And when you're strong in what you say, it will be accepted.
So you were more fearless.
More fearless, exactly. And more able to stand up for truth in terms of my reporting as well. I wasn't afraid of criticism in the same way I would have been previously. So that second half, those 15 years that from my mid-30s onwards, that was a wonderful period for me professionally, where I did much more challenging work, much more valuable work, I feel, and because of being much more clear that my work was not me, I was something distinct from the work, it was much, much more enjoyable for me as well.
So did you feel that the quality of your work has improved post meeting the
Hugely, hugely, because I wasn't, even though I didn't recognize that ego drive before, and although it made me work hard, so I tried to get as much as I could of the information that was necessary, and I always had some values in what I was doing. I didn't want to print things that were misleading or wrong, but it was like more at the personal level that I was better able to listen more carefully because of being more at peace in myself. Even with interviews, you know, I would be more sympathetic with who I was talking to instead of being agitated and wanting to get the story sort of thing. I was more with the person, and actually the result of that is that you get much better interviews when you're not stressed yourself.
That's right.
You can make the person feel relaxed. So that second half of my career was so much more enjoyable than the first. It's amazing, like a personal experiment. You know, the difference between chalk and cheese. The cheese was much more good to taste than the chalky bit.
Wonderful. So as brother said, that due to his self-reflective processes, the two factions of his career and the differences he pointed out, and how coming in contact with the Brahma Kumaris and the self-reflective process that he experimented with drastically changed his content, his level of contentment in his profession. And were you pointed out as, okay, he's a person I should not approach, he's a very egoistic person? Were you given such comments by anyone?
No, I don't remember anyone telling me that directly, but looking back, I think that that was present. It wasn't present in an obviously egoistic way, I don't think, in my personal relationships, because I always had a lot of uncertainty as well. So I was, in some ways, quite a passive person. You know, in a way, with work, it was uncharacteristic of me that I pushed myself so hard and had that success.
Okay.
And you're right, the getting position and so forth, and getting a big show in the paper and all of those kind of things, they did feed the ego. And I think that as time went on, that did definitely have a negative effect on my relationships. The thing was that I was also married to a journalist who also was very striving in her career. And so there was an element of competition between us. And that wasn't very healthy either. Sometimes I don't think my wife had any dependency, but I would say that on my side, there was this element that I needed reassurance that I was loved and that I was okay, you know, as a father. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good husband. And actually what I've learned over the years is that although that's not a bad motive, but it's not best if it's coming from a place of neediness, if it's coming from a place of an ego identity. Like, it's not obvious ego in the sense of being very dominating or anything like that. My wife made sure that I wasn't like that because she's a very strong character herself. I was a cooperative modern husband, if you like, in Western terms at any rate. You know, I'd help with the babies when they were small, I would change nappies, I looked after the children when my wife needed time for her work. So I was kind of not dominating or egotistical in that sense, but more in the sense that that emptiness that created the ego needs was also present in my personal relationships. So, as I say, it was like I needed to be a good husband, I needed to be a good father, and that's actually taking. And what I've learned over the years is that the essence of the spiritual journey is to shift you from someone who is in need of approval of others, of success in your career or whatever, change you from someone who is needy to someone who is giving. This is really the big change. But that happened over quite a long period for me. Quickly, in terms of the career, as I say, within a year or two of starting these reflective practices, I was very different in my relationship with work. More giving, more considerate. But in terms of personal relationships, it was harder to recognize the ego. It was more hidden. Partly because of thinking of myself as a modern, giving husband who was a good father and all of that, because we had 2 sons and I enjoyed family life very much. But ultimately I realized that a real givingness in relationships comes from the soul and not from an identity of being a family man. That's actually a form of taking as well, a form of neediness. If you think I'm a good family man, I need to give the image of being a good family man.
Yes.
My wife should respect me as a good family man. My children should respect me as a good
society should respect you.
That's all taking.
Yes.
That's all a form of taking and boosting the ego identity of being a family man. But this is subtle. And it was many years before I really recognized that. It was lovely when I did recognize it, because it's amazing how it frees you to really love. You know, like a really love. You're not taking anything in relationships. And I feel that now with my grandchildren and my sons and my now ex-wife. We separated many years back, after the children had grown up. But she's a very good friend. And in those relationships now where there's no neediness, it means also that one's actions are more accurate. You know, you're not giving because you need something from that you're giving. You're giving because there's a real need on the part of the other person. Or maybe it's just without any conditions, it's just the expression of love with one that you're close with. And that's what I feel my relationships have become much more like now. But as I say, that came much later. A long time before I really realised that.
Was it too late when you realized it?
No, I suppose if I'd realised it in those first years when we were still together as a family, perhaps the family, the relationship with my ex might have continued. But when she asked for us to separate, which was after the children had grown up and left home anyway, as I said, the reason she gave was we'd married young, we met at 18, we married at 21, we started a family at 23, and she said she'd never experienced life as a single woman and she really wanted to do that. And I think probably she meant that. So perhaps even if I had transformed quicker, she still would have wanted to experience that life as a single woman. But still, I've no regrets, and I feel that now we've arrived at the point where it's a relationship of deep mutual respect, and I value that a lot. I feel that many couples who stay together might not actually be so privileged as to have such a beautiful relationship as I have now.
So whom do you stay with now, brother?
I live now at a Brahmakumari's retreat centre.
Okay.
It's about 6 miles south of Oxford City in the UK, and my ex-wife lives in Oxford itself. So very easy for us to get together, for the grandchildren to visit. They come sometimes to the retreat centre or to my ex-wife's place, or we visit them in their homes. So everything on that front is fine.
So what about your profession?
In summary, I've benefited professionally and personally enormously through learning to make the shift in the sense of who I am from being an ego identity, either as a journalist or as a family man, to being a soul who is an eternal being, who is able to take strength from the divine and who's able to bring that beauty into my life. Wonderful change.
Wonderful. So our first guide on this journey, Brother Navel, has shared how this shift in his thoughts has tremendously made his personal and his professional life better. And in the forthcoming episode, we will continue this journey with Brother Navel and dig more into his personal and professional life and his experiences as a Raja Yogi. Thank you, brother, for spending your time with us. Thank you, viewers, for staying with us on this show.